Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon from Washington, D.C. on this beautiful day. Good afternoon, good morning, journalists from all over the world. Thank you for joining us. We are starting our press briefing for the second finance ministers and central bank governors, the second FMCBG meeting of G20, which was concluded just now. Present with us here, Her Excellency Minister of Finance, Republic of Indonesia, Sri Mulyani Indrawati, and His Excellency Governor of Bank Indonesia, Bapak Ferry Warjiyo. Both Excellencies will provide remarks for about 15 minutes. It will then be followed by Q&A session for about 30 to 40 minutes. For all of you who are joining, please keep your mic muted, and then later to ask question, please write your question in the chat room on WebEx or Zoom, depending on where you are joining from. We will start with Her Excellency Minister of Finance, Bu Sri Mulyani. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Pak Febrio. G20 finance ministers and central bank governors met on Wednesday, 20 April 2022, here in the IMF headquarters for the second time under the Indonesian G20 presidency. The meeting was attended by G20 members, invitees countries including Ukraine, and international and regional organizations. The meeting was held under challenging circumstances as Russia's war against Ukraine continues and its impact are felt by countries beyond Europe. Members expressed deep concerns about humanitarian crisis, economic and financial impact of the war, and called for the end of the war as soon as possible. Many members condemned the war as unprovoked and unjustifiable, and a violation of international law. Some members expressed concerns about the economic consequences of the sanction. Members share the view that the war and the associated action have and will continue to hinder the global economic recovery process, raising particular concern about food security and energy prices. Low-income and vulnerable countries will be particularly affected as they were already facing challenges, among others, limited fiscal space and high debt vulnerability. Members underlined the crucial role of the G20 as the premier forum for international economic cooperation to deal with the current multifaceted and complex global economic challenges. Members also supported the adaptation of the existing agenda to enable the G20 to address the economic impact of the war while also maintaining a commitment to address pre-existing global challenges and lead the world back to strong, sustainable, inclusive, and balanced growth. Members share the view that the war has made global growth as well as recovery much more complex and undermine the existing global efforts in addressing health, pandemic preparedness and response, high debt in vulnerable countries, and climate change mitigation and adaptation. Members also supported the ongoing G20 focus on these issues, as well as its other priorities, including international taxation. Members noted concern about broader and persistent inflationary pressures leading to several central banks raising their policy rates, resulting in faster than expected tightening of global liquidity. The higher policy rates brought into focus the need to deliver on the February commitment to well-calibrated, well-planned, and well-communicated exit strategy to support the recovery and mitigate against potential spillover. Collective and coordinated action to get the pandemic under control remains a priority for members, who noted that increased COVID-19 infection in some regions have weighed on growth, prolonged supply disruption, exacerbated inflationary pressure, and consequently could hinder the global recovery. There was broad support for the World Health Organization, or WHO, World Bank, WB, assessment of the significant financing gaps that need to be addressed, and support for the G20 to act to address those gaps. Most members agreed on the need for a new financial mechanism dedicated to addressing pandemic PPR financing gaps, and many concurred with the WHO. World Bank assessment, many concurred that the WHO and World Bank assessment, in which Financial Intermediary Fund, or FIF, housed at the World Bank, is the most effective option for a new financial mechanism. Given the support among many members to set up FIF, the Presidency concluded that the World Bank should begin exploring the process to develop and set up the FIF, alongside the discussion on potential key governance and operating arrangement, including ensuring the crucial leadership role of the WHO. Some members noted the concern on the broader PPR coordination mechanism that will be simultaneously discussed among members.
Pak Ferry, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Under cooperation in the international financial architecture, members reiterated their commitment to support low-income and vulnerable countries, particularly those at risk of debt distress. Members raised concern on the slow progress in the implementation of the common framework and call for the next step to be more timely, orderly, and predictable. Members look forward to the timely agreement of the debt treatment for Chad and the establishment of the creditor committee for Zambia. Members welcome the establishment of the IMF's Resilience and Sustainable Trust, RST, encouraging further pledges towards the global ambition of $100 billion of voluntary contribution for countries in need, and look forward to its operationalization by the annual meeting 2022. Given the current conjuncture, members acknowledge the crucial role of multilateral development banks, MDBs, to support development financing and in catalyzing private sector mobilization. Members look forward to the completion of the review of MDB's capital adequacy framework by the independent expert panel. On capital flows, members share the view that countries face various challenges in maintaining financial resilience and promoting sustainable capital flows during current global economic conjuncture. Many members noted that the calibration of policy responses is warranted. Against the background of increased uncertainty, members reaffirm their commitment to a strong and effective global financial safety net, with a quota-based and adequately resourced IMF at its center, and a timely conclusion of the 16th General Review of the quota by 15 December 2022.
Thank you so much. On the sustainable finance, members underline the critical role of sustainable finance for green, resilience, and inclusive global economic recovery, and the achievement of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development in line with the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, or UNFCCC, and the Paris Agreement. Members also shared their strategic guidance in developing the sustainable finance deliverables. There was a broad support that the high-level framework for transition finance should cover a wide range of alignment approaches and be inclusive, practical, science-based, and forward-looking to ensure that it can enable the financial market to facilitate climate transition. The meeting also noted members' consideration in improving the credibility of financial institution commitments, in developing a policy toolbox highlighting ways to scale up sustainable finance instruments. Several members highlighted the importance to scale up de-risking facilities and exploring sustainable finance instruments beyond bonds, while also taking into account country-specific circumstances. Members also pointed toward the need for support for small and medium-sized enterprises, or SMEs. Some members also noted their views on policy levers, which will be discussed in the upcoming forum in mid-June. Several members reiterated their commitment to take forward the action of the G20 Sustainable Finance Roadmap. Members also look forward to continue the dialogue in the third G20 Finance Ministers and Central Bank Governors meeting in Bali on June 15 and 16, 2022. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister and Governor. This is clearly the meeting was held under challenging circumstances as Russia's war against Ukraine continues and its impact are felt by countries beyond Europe. If you could, Minister, allude to the situation of how the cooperation and bilateral consultations have been happening, and also how these are all brought into conclusive of the meeting of today's FMCBG. Please, Minister.
Well, this is an extraordinary situation. It's not business as usual, a very dynamic and challenging one. So for Indonesia, since we hosted the first finance minister and central bank governor meeting back in February in Jakarta, the development of the global environment is actually deteriorated and changed very fast. Due to the first pandemic, which is not yet over, the second one is the Russia war in Ukraine, and also in this case, a still very dynamic and the implication of the war, including the extremely increased energy price, food price, fertilizer. So during this very dynamic situation, Indonesia, which is holding this presidency of G20, have to continue and intensively communicate and consult it with all G20 members. Because G20 basic governance is actually based on consultation as well as cooperation. So in this case, we talk to all members country in order for us to be able to first making sure that this April meeting is going to be continue addressing the issue which is very important, that is the global economic risk, not only coming from the war, but also since we are not yet over with the pandemic, this is still also important. And now with the increasing inflation due to this, in this case, energy as well as food price, will create another challenging environment for all policymakers. So we discuss quite intensively with all members country. And of course, in this case, how we are going to arrange the meeting, who's going to speak. Of course, there is a lead speakers, and how then the focus that we want to actually address in this meeting first should be relevant and significantly important in affecting the global economic performance. And second one will continue addressing the agenda of our presidency during this G20 that is related to the economic recovery, exit strategy, international financial architecture, joint finance health, as well as the discussion about, and today we are not talking about the taxation, but it is still continue a very important global taxation agenda and the agreement that we've already achieved, and also sustainable finance. So these are all continue a very important agenda priority for Indonesia presidency, supported strongly by all members, but at the same time, members also asking that the current geopolitical situation, especially related to the war in Ukraine, should be also addressed.
Very challenging indeed, and also a testimony on how the spirit of collaboration and spirit of multilateralism was really showing during the meeting. I have a question from Eric Martin from the BBC. If you could unmute your mic and go ahead, ask your question, Eric.
Sure. Thank you so much. Just making sure that you can hear me. I wanted to ask about the walkout from the G20 meeting by some members from including the U.S. and Canada and the UK, and ask about the impact that this walkout had as Russia was beginning its intervention, and also about the effectiveness of the G20, and whether in this fragmented environment, whether the G20's effectiveness as a forum is eroded by the level of conflict and disagreement among membership.
All right, thank you, Eric. Bu Menteri.
Okay, well, during this consultation and communication before the meeting, we do understand there are some scenarios regarding first how G7++ is going to respond of what the Russia first attendance and when they are going to intervene. So in this case, this is not totally surprise to all of us, especially for us as a chair, and I think has been done without disrupting, as well as in this case creating a problem on our discussion, which is related to the substance itself. I think point taken in which within the G20, including the invited country, in this case Ukraine, and international organization, we were able to express the view of all members and invitees regarding the global economic risk and how this risk need to be addressed. Interestingly, even though in this case that there is a strong condemnation regarding the war in Ukraine by Russia, but all members is actually underlying the need for us to be able to continue maintain G20 cooperation and the importance of multilateralism. I think this is well and widely recognized and expressed openly by all members. Why? Because I think G20 members see the responsibility of this group in order for us to be able to address the issue which is systematically important for the global economy. Currently, we are facing, some members mentioning and use the term perfect storm. We are not yet over with the pandemic situation. The recovery is still very fragile and very early. We were facing with the supply disruption, and now with the war is even getting more deteriorated with the increasing price of energy, food, fertilizer, and raw material, including mineral commodities. And that's definitely will create a very challenging task for policymakers. How we are going to be able to continue supporting the recovery process while the inflation is increasing very, very rapidly in many countries, and will force the response of many monetary authority to then react to that. So in this case, I think what is even more interesting, all members see the G20 is a very important forum, a premier economic cooperation forum for us to discuss both in terms of the risks as well as how we should coordinate and collaborate together. I think that is something which is really very strongly expressed during the meeting. So I'm confident that this will not erode the cooperation as well as the role of the G20 forum.
Thank you, Minister. Governor, if I may, during the meeting, it is also noted that there is a consensus that members noted concerns about broader and persistent inflationary pressure leading to several central banks raising their policy rates and resulting in faster than expected tightening for global liquidity. Now, these higher policy rates brought into focus and need to deliver on was the February commitment that we called well-calibrated, well-planned, and well-communicated exit strategies. How is this relevance of this statement especially in the light of current situation that the world is facing? Please, Governor.
Yes, during the discussion, of course, the current development, the war in Ukraine, have some implication that increasing global commodity prices, being energy and food price, has impacted many countries in the world, including also in emerging and developing countries, with more challenging problem of high inflation. At the same time, in the advanced countries, the acceleration of normalization of monetary policy becoming also bring to forward, including also global liquidity tightening. This is the importance of G20, where discussion, understanding becoming important. This is where every central bank need to make a well-calibrated, well-planned, well-communicated. Well-calibrated meaning to take action of their respective authority of monetary policy making based on a very thorough adjustment and assessment of inflation and global economic growth. And of course, taking into account what the impact to other countries, to global economy. This is very important where G20 have taken the role. Without G20, of course, every country take the policy only on its own domestic interest. Under the G20, the discussion bring forward to global interests, taking into account other impact to other countries. That's well calibrated. Well planned, of course, the need for making what we call it assessment of what policy will be doing going forward. Forward guidance is very important. Even though the policy will be taken in the month or quarter ahead, it is good and understanding and the discussion of G20 forward guidance is important. So other countries and the market, of course, can take into account the planet policy action into their own decision. And the third, the communication is very important. It's not only to ensure the expectation being transmitted properly, but also this is a part of governance of policy making, being transparent and accountable to the public. And this is the G20, where normalization process of policy making under this very difficult challenges is very important to be well calibrated, well planned, and well communicated.
Wow, that's really encouraging to see that policymakers can actually see and reach consensus on that challenges and how the policies are going to be well calibrated, well communicated, and well planned. I will turn to the next question. This is from Aziz from Kata Data. The question is, this is about the transition to endemic. When we talk about transition to endemic in several countries, and several countries still have a different kind of pace in terms of transitioning to endemic. And the meeting was actually talking about the global preparedness for future pandemic. So, Minister, if you could explain to the audience as to how the relevance of this global preparedness for pandemic, a future pandemic, and there are some transition now into endemic situation. Please, Minister.
Well, the pandemic COVID-19 have a devastating impact for global economy. More than 13 trillion actually global economy has been gone because of this pandemic. And that's why we need to learn a lot how the world should better prepare for the next pandemic, because COVID-19 is not going to be the first or the last pandemic. And that's why it is important for, in this case, G20 to address this issue. We have established what we call it the joint finance and health ministers in order for us to be able to identify what is exactly first the source of problem, that is the financing gap of the current health system, whether this is at the country level, regional and global level mechanism. So the ability for mechanism at the country level, regional or global, in order for us to be able to better respond, effectively respond if pandemic is going to happen. The second one, of course, resources, that is financing. So in this case, we estimate, or in this case, World Bank and WHO, they both has been tasked to estimate what is the financing gap that is required for the world as well as each country to be able to better prepare for the next pandemic that we are going to hit. And then we are discussing about how we are going to address those. Of course, first, WHO will continue an important institution in health at the global level. But at the same time, DJ Tedros, as well as other members at the G20, recognize that there is need for us to establish financing facility that will augment it and support the current existing arrangement. So these are all what is being discussed, and very encouragingly within this meeting, there are quite a lot or strong support for us to be able to establish this financing facility, although the detail regarding the governance as well as the mechanism decision-making process still need to be discussed. But this is a very good progress in which G20, again, learning from this very devastating pandemic, initiated a mechanism, financing mechanism, as well as supporting the existing institution like WHO to be able to better prepare for the world to face the next pandemic. I think this is going to be also creating a more certainty that now with this pandemic, all of us have to actually see the past 2.5 years. The economic and the activity of the people has been affected very, very significantly. And that's why we want to learn from this pandemic and have a better preparation.
Wow, very encouraging indeed. I will turn to a live question again. I will invite Andrea Shalal from Reuters. Andrea?
Hey, Minister Indrawati, thank you so much for doing this, and Mr. Governor. I wanted to ask you about the ability of the body of the G20 to continue to function. You talked about it being very challenging under the current circumstances. What happens if the war continues? And and how do you keep the body together then? And specifically on the issue of food security, how are you able to move forward if there's this sort of effort to do a food security summit by the United States and other participants that's outside of the G20 framework and therefore doesn't include Russia, which is such a large producer of food. And just on the food security thing, how quickly do you see action being taken to prevent even greater distress? We see the numbers rising sharply.
Okay. Thank you, Andrea. Minister, would you like to?
Well, this is one of the risks which is being addressed and expressed by all members, that the war is created both energy and food security or crisis. And this is going to be very, very critical for all of us to be able to address. I think within the G20, and that's why under our presidency, we invited FAO in order for us to be able to get the assessment. And there will be more work that will be done in terms of how not only G20, but the world will be able to have a much better food security that is going to create more certainty on the global economy. That's also including on the energy. And this is one of the area which I think still at the very early, but it's been recognized as a very critical for all of us to be able to recover our economy together. And initiative, whether by the United States to address this issue of the FAO, of the food problem or food crisis, I think is certainly welcome. The nature of the G20 cooperation and collaboration, usually some country within the members have the initiative, and they are going to then create a certain activity, mobilizing support, and when it is very important, then it can be addressed within the G20. So I don't see this as a competition, but more like reinforcing or even deepening the discussion, which is critically important for all of us to be able to address the global economic risk like food crisis.
Thank you, Minister. It's very encouraging to see that during the meeting, clearly, there are some challenging moments and also situations and discussions during the meeting. But it is also very encouraging to see that the substance of the agenda of G20 continued to be discussed and to be found solutions, especially on the sustainable finance. When we talk about sustainable finance, we see that globally, countries are gathering and converging into the sustainable finance as a solution for climate change agenda. Could you explain a little bit, especially the context of the discussion in the Sustainable Finance Working Group and how this is going to be affecting the future capital flows into transformation of economies as to also at the same time addressing the climate change risk?
Well, while we're also discussing the current risks, all members also widely recognize that climate change is the risk that need to be addressed by all members, not only G20. We definitely also support, in this case, the UNFCCC and the Paris Agreement. And the discussion within the finance minister is certainly will be heavy on the financing side, which is, I think, very critical for all of us to be able to achieve the commitment on the climate change, especially to deliver the net zero or nationally determined contribution for each country or sustainable development goal. So financing is very, very critical. The discussion also take into consideration especially the role of private sector and how we can use policy levers in order for us to be able to track as well as credibly creating an environment for private sector to involve or engage and support the climate change agenda. I think there are many of the discussion that we are talking about how financial market can facilitate climate transition, because this is very important. The transition mechanism and the transition financing is going to be critical for all countries, which is at the policy level, our commitment is already there, but sometimes constrained by the financing side. And that's why this is the role of the G20, as well as even in my capacity as the coalition of the Climate Action Minister of Finance, which is talking about the climate action. We are discussing about this financing aspect. There is, as I said earlier, the agreement that the approach, including on the financing side and technology, should be inclusive, practical, science-based, and forward-looking. That means this is not an exclusive only for a big project, which is related to the climate change, but there is also recognition that this financing should be also available and accessible, especially for the small and medium enterprises. So that we are going to be able to mobilize this funding, and especially coming from the private sector, that can be tracked in a credible way, how each country can deliver their commitment, and at the same time, private sector globally can also participate.
Thank you, Minister. I will turn now to Governor Perry. What were the views from the G20 countries regarding the risks on capital flows volatility, especially given the current geopolitical situation in Ukraine, and also still a resurgence of COVID in several places as well? Are there any concrete steps that agreed regarding this issue? And also at the same time, maybe central banks in several developed countries began to normalize their monetary policies. And there is even chance that the Fed will be a little bit more aggressive than we expected. How is this discussion in G20 evolve? And what are the consensus that have been evolving?
Well, certainly the war in Ukraine accelerated the need and the tension to make the right decision in this very difficult and challenging. Before this conflict happened, it's already a discussion on how G20 can discuss and better collaborate in the global aspect. Of course, with the war in Ukraine, with the commodity price increase, the inflation becoming a problem everywhere, this is becoming more important for G20 to come forward. So what needs to be done and being discussed among the G20 members? 3 areas. The first, we talked before about the need for advanced countries or any member countries that need to exit, to normalize their policy. The need for well-calibrated, well-planned, well-communicated. So any action of a member countries can be better understand and can be better prepare the implication to other countries. That's one. The second is, of course, the need for emerging countries or other countries, the recipient countries of capital flows, to better prepare. How to be better prepared? Of course, the sound macroeconomic policy, fiscal, monetary. The new initiative that being discussed is the need for the IMF to bring about common understanding, the integrated policy framework. How monetary policy can be integrated to suit well the purpose of managing stability and supporting growth, including also the capital flows management on it. And the second area is also the need for the IMF and the BIS, Bank for International Settlement, to work together. Under the BIS, there is a discussion, which is the need for member countries to, when discussing and formulating monetary policy, also taking into account financial stability. Remember, the capital flows impact a member countries or any countries, not only monetary stability, but also financial system stability. So, and the second area of the discussion at G20, which is becoming more intense discussion now, which is under the IMF, can help countries to formulate better monetary policy under integrated policy framework and cooperation with the BIS to better also managing financial stability. This is the second area. The third area is also providing assistance and facility for member country, especially the least developed country.
Yeah.
Initiative on formulating resilient and sustainable trust fund. As Minister Simulasi mentioned, this is a recurrent crisis and may be recurrent. It's better prepare for the future. And better prepare is of course including the least developed country which is impacted the most. And this is one of the success under Presidency. Working closely with the IMF and G20, the pledges of $100 billion voluntary of the countries from the SDR allocation for IMF Resilient and Sustainable Trust Fund. And this under the area 3 also understanding the need to increase the quota-based IMF, which is the discussion becoming more intense. Hopefully there will be understanding on the 16th general review quotas by 15 December 2023, where the IMF as quota-based is becoming stronger and can help assist member countries better in these difficult challenges.
Wow, a lot of promising consensus that will be really helping with the current situation that we are really facing. I will now turn to a live question. I will ask Delphine Tuitu from AFP.
Hi, hello. Thank you for taking my question. I would like to come back to the debt issue, and I was wondering if there's any progress in terms of implementation of the common framework, or can we expect any progress soon? And what about the role of China? The IMF and the World Bank and some countries would like to see more engagement, more commitment from China. Do you see any signal from China during the meeting to engage in this process?
Okay, I will turn to Minister for this question, please.
Well, certainly the situation of, which are faced by many, especially low-income country, which is vulnerable, related to first, they are already exposed with a high debt, fiscal space which is narrow, and now created another, or they are facing with another shock like food and energy security or crisis. This definitely is going to also create a huge burden for many low-income countries. The G20 has come up with a common framework and debt sustainability analysis. The discussion regarding how this common framework should or could be used as a platform for a much more timely, effective, predictable debt restructuring for all the low-income country or even now emerging country, which is predicted is going to also face the implication of the higher interest rate and weaken global economy. I think this is going to be very critical. Some members is expressing their view that this require a more credible, predictable, and timely mechanism. China, in this case, stating that this need to be addressed on case-by-case basis, and they definitely, in this case, also encouraging to have a mechanism that can be address this debt in a more credible way. A lot of discussion about transparency and also asking for more participation, including the multilateral development institution, which China in this case see as an important to also participate in this debt restructuring. I think this is going to still continue having a challenging situation, but because of the pressure coming from especially the debtor, which they are becoming more critical, and it is important for G20 as well as the global economy to be able to provide a certainty as well as a way out in the most efficient and certain and credible way. Then this is going to be an issue that will be discussed further on the G20. The role of the IMF has been recognized and mentioned, including by China, to play a role or lead role in this case to be able to facilitate this kind of discussion. The World Bank is also playing a very important role. So the role of the both IMF World Bank are actually critical. But we all understand that many of this debt is no longer actually coming from the traditional, the Paris Club creditors. So there will be a process that needed for the new creditor to be able to then build the trust as well as a mechanism to discuss with other creditors so that the world will be in a much better and certain situation or place for us when the situation of many developing countries, especially low-income countries, which is very difficult because of their high debt exposure, that require a solution in a most effective way. So yeah, this is going to still continue an issue that will be discussed further within the G20, especially on the finance track.
Thank you, Minister. This is probably going to be the last question. I know that there's Stephanie Johnston from Tax Analyst. We know that tax is not really part of the second FMCBG agenda, but if you like to ask question, general question about tax, go ahead, Stephanie.
So much for taking my question. This is for the Minister, obviously. How confident are you that all countries, especially developing ones, will be able to implement the two-pillar global tax reform plan, given the tight deadlines for the new rules to take effect in 2023? What is the G20 presidency doing at the political level to ensure implementation happens in that time? And is there any chance of extending the deadline, the timeline, given the external economic challenges brought on by the pandemic and Russia's invasion of Ukraine? Thank you so much.
Okay, so that tax agenda, Pillar 1, Pillar 2, what's the likelihood for the timeline? Minister, would you like to address?
Well, this is one of the most important achievements of the G20 during the previous presidency and will be continued by the Indonesia during our presidency. That global tax agreement is very critical, especially we are all recognizing that the fiscal space of all countries will be narrowed, and that's why consolidation and improving on their tax revenue is becoming very important. And one of the important achievements is how we are going to address the tax evasion, tax avoidance through this global taxation agreement, including in this case on the digital taxation. I think what is actually being agreed is including the timeline, which is going to be implemented effectively next year, will definitely require a lot of, especially for many countries which require a technical assistance to be also supported. I'm sure the momentum is going to be continue for all countries which is require and need support. There will be like a mechanism in place, whether this is will be tasked by the G20 or asking international organizations like OECD, IMF or World Bank in order for them, or even ADB. ADB now also establishing the tax center within their institution. I think these are all becoming also an instrument for capacity building and support for many countries who need to have this kind of support. But ambition, I think, is very important because the world is in a very critical situation. We require and we need for all countries to be able to have a much better and, again, reliable source of tax. And also together as a group, as well as globally, we should prevent and fighting against the unfair practices within the global taxation.
Thank you, Minister. This has been very productive day and very productive press conference that we are doing. I will give 2 minutes for each His Excellency Governor Perry and also Ministry of Finance to give a concluding statement. I would give the first chance to Governor Perry.
Thank you very much. Indeed, this is a productive day, and this is G20 is all about. And G20 born to solve the global solution and provide solution for challenging problem. And this is a time where G20 under Indonesia presidency to come together to solve the problem of the world, to solve differences, to, of course, make global economy and every member recover together, recover stronger. On the central bank, of course, one, the need for well-calibrated, well-planned, well-communicated policy making. Second, how can we better together, enhancing the resilience of emerging country and developing country. So emerging country and developing country can recover together, recover stronger under very difficult challenge, the global spillover. Number three, how to strengthen the international financial institution to give advice and to, of course, help any member country in this difficult time. Under presidency of Indonesia, let's do together, recover together, recover stronger.
Thank you, Governor. Minister?
Well, G20 was established based on the sense of important responsibility and cooperation at that time to save the world from the global financial crisis that threatening the global economy into a depression. And I think since then, G20 is actually creating or resulting many initiatives which actually creating a much better policy response, especially when we are dealing with systematically important issue that can threaten the global economic recovery or growth as well as stability. The situation that we are facing today is even more complex. We've been through the pandemic for more than 2 years and still ongoing. We also now facing with a much complex policy environment like higher commodity price, inflation, and also geopolitical tension. So this spirit of cooperation is very important. Under Indonesia presidency, we continue urge as well as communicate, coordinate, consult with all the G20 members country, which they are strongly supporting the Indonesia presidency agenda. First, of course, our original agenda, for example, on the exit strategy and scarring effect, international financial architecture, we are discussing about finance and health, as well as on our discussion on sustainable finance and global taxation. These are all very important and high priority agenda. Now, with the current crisis, which is now escalated with geopolitical tension, it doesn't mean that we are conducting meeting business as usual. We are continue responding to this evolving and developing of this risk, and at the same time, we will continue also addressing the issue which is important, for example, like the joint health and finance, international financial architecture, sustainable finance, and also on a global taxation. So what I'm saying is that in order for us to be able to recover together, recover stronger, as Pak Perry mentioned, we need more and even stronger cooperation. We need more multilateralism. And G20 is still continue a premier forum for all of us to be able to discuss and talk about all the issue. And hopefully we are going to come up with a cooperation and consensus. So we could, and if I think when we are all will provide the strong goodwill, I think we are going to be able to overcome the challenging tasks that we are facing today.
Indeed. Thank you very much, Minister. Thank you very much, Governor. Indeed, a spirit of collaboration, a spirit of multilateralism is the one that we are really needing nowadays, especially in difficult times that we're all facing. Thank you very much from Washington, D.C. Of the second Finance Ministers and Central Bank Governors meeting of G20. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much for joining. Stay safe, stay well. Bye-bye.